Okay, for people who are joining this live stream, long-awaited meeting about the Public Paclet Repository. And let's see, make this a little bigger. All right. So the concept is, well, who's going to describe the basic story is here? Is Bob going to describe it, or is somebody else going to describe it?
Sure, I can describe it. The basic idea is, we have this Paclet system that's been around forever, and it's been sort of invisible behind the scenes, working perfectly most of the time and doing great stuff. But we want to both expose it, which Todd has sort of done already for the upcoming version, and we want to open it up so that it's easier for people to put their own.
Well, so wait a minute. What has Todd already done? I mean, in other words,
so documenting, moving the stuff that exists forever into the system context and documenting it, and doing some small cleaning.
Some slight changes to the functionality, the API, the symbol names, and
okay. So can I see that documentation?
That documentation does not exist yet. It's written. We have nothing to show yet for the documentation. We'll have to have a meeting about that in the future.
Okay, but so if I'm a private user, so to speak, can I have my own Paclet server?
Yes, you can definitely do that. You have actually been able to do that for a long time.
Okay, but now
without us telling how to do it, but it's possible.
Let's go through what is in a Paclet. Where is?
Well, I mean, is this about the Paclet system, or is this about the Paclet repository? And I mean, if we talk about Paclets in general, I mean that could easily
just let's survey
of this meeting.
Let's survey that for a second, okay? I'm just trying to understand what a
Paclet is it's a unit of Wolfram system functionality. Can contain almost any kind of Wolfram system resource, from .m files to Wolfram libraries to front-end style sheets and palettes.
Okay, so show me at the top level how I specify a Paclet. This is more relevant than you think. Okay?
We've had a discussion before. You don't really specify a Paclet at the top level. You can ask what Paclets are installed on your system, and you are given a Paclet object. The representation of the Paclet in the Wolfram language is a Paclet object expression, and this is something that you generally do not type in by hand, but are rather given it by some function like Paclet find, for example. That's the main function.
Okay, but if I'm creating a Paclet, how do I do it?
If you're creating a Paclet, you do not start by creating Bob is going to show, I think later on, some ideas for. I mean, we can give people tools that give them start out with developing a Paclet that will create. I mean, you typically have a directory.
Okay, so
directory has a certain structure and certain files within it, including
let's give it an analog. Okay, so in the function repository, we have this essentially GUI for creating what becomes a resource object that then goes into the resource system. Now, in a sense, all the stuff that's in here gets packaged up into that association, correct?
Right.
Right.
Okay, so is the idea to do something similar with Paclets?
Yeah, that's towards the bottom of this notebook. If you run it, my proposal for that is will appear.
What would I run?
So you have to run. So the first 4 cells there are the dog food. So that via Paclet Manager, I've actually deployed a resource system to my cloud account and created a Paclet server on it.
What is that?
What is that here? Oh, geez. Okay. I don't know why that failed. Are you in? This is 12.1, I assume.
Yep.
Okay. Well, if the part at the end fails, then I can get ready to show it on my screen.
Well, I assume it will fail now. Why wouldn't it fail? It hasn't successfully got the resource system client.
Well, it might only need that Paclet resource one. So, and then if you go down to using a definition notebook, you can try doing those things. We'll see if it works. No.
Okay. You want to show me on your screen?
Let me clear off some stuff that I'd rather not put on a live stream, and I'll show you in a minute.
Oh, let me just make some remarks. I mean, what we want to give people a tool that says, okay, I'm going to start a Paclet, and to do that, I need a directory somewhere. I need a Paclet info file. And if we give people a tool that helps them create that and even manage that going forward, that's great. But a Paclet development process is usually something that it's a long-term thing. I mean, I write Paclets all the time, and we have hundreds of people making Paclets within the company, and they're working in their IDEs for days or weeks at a time to produce something. It's not like you just, you don't just.
I understand, but at some point you have to get the Paclet info file.
Right, and we can definitely provide tools, create one for you, and give you fields to fill out.
How do people make Paclet info files right now?
They write them by hand. They're very small. They're very simple files. They write them by hand.
Well, and how would I say install a palette from a Paclet info file? Is it a mess?
The Paclet info file describes the ways in which the Paclet extends the system. It has these things called extensions. And all you do is specify that you have a front-end extension. That's a way of telling that that's a way to tell the Paclet manager that your Paclet has front-end resources. So your directory structure of your Paclet then will have a palette file, say, in the appropriate directory, subdirectory, and that's all you do. It doesn't. You just simply say have a front-end extension.
In other words,
in your Paclet info file.
It is kind of shocking that the file organization of our whole system that I guess I had to invent in like 1990 after things started getting very messy is still the same system we're using today. And I guess it's working okay. So in other words...
Yeah, it's working.
Stephen, would you like me to show...
It was 1996, and I remember because I was there.
What did we have before that? Was it
I mean, we had something before that, but it got dramatically more modern in 1996, and then it's kind of been more or less in that form since then, with a few tweaks here and there.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, I'm losing track of time, obviously. I think there may have been a previous iteration of rearrangement a little earlier, but okay. Brian, by the way, on our live stream, makes the point that I would make too. Unknown error is one of the most ridiculous and useless things that you can ever print out. Why does it say that?
Oh, those are probably I don't know. Some of the unknown errors might be
a code error. What's that?
That's coming out of my code.
Okay.
And I mean, I'll just think about that. That's one of those
for mine.
It's terrible. I mean, it reminds me, I got to tell my story about using an IBM mainframe in probably 1977, where, it produces some message, IEH0321 or something. And there are these giant paper manuals. And I look through these giant paper manuals, and they've got pages and pages of error messages. And I finally find the message that I have. And all it says is probable user error.
Well, that's very descriptive, though. It means you did something wrong.
I know. I was just then the real question is, what are all the giant, several linear feet of paper that are the other error messages? Things like, a rat climbed into the wiring or something. I don't know. Anyway, never mind. But
this unknown error is one of those things that's really not supposed to happen, right? It's kind of this fall through.
Of course.
I don't even... It's not like the file we wouldn't unzip, or it didn't have the right content, or there was an HTTP error trying to download it. All those things are reported. So I really don't know what is going on here.
Honestly think that just the very phrase unknown error is a red flag for people like me who just are like, how could that possibly happen? In any case, okay.
I should probably just not show it.
I think you should just not show the words unknown error. I don't think it's useful.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just a slot for a text.
So this is my idea, where basically the traditional Paclet info file makes up the body of this package notebook, and then there's all this stuff around the outside that goes into resource objecting it, resource objectifying. So
is the stuff you have at the top there real, or is the stuff you have at the top?
Well, it's mostly fake. But the idea would be
no, but I mean the UX is intended to be real. That's not
the UX is intended to be real. So this would pop open a notebook where you would document a symbol, and you can see here this obviously would not be displayed in the end form, but the notebook metadata will track these things, and it'll all sort of be held in memory until you deploy it, kind of like the function resource. And if you deploy it, it'll build the directory structure as needed for you.
Let me try to understand this. So you're telling me, I mean, most of this work is, people might be building things in notebooks. They might be building things in an external IDE. They're basically having a directory's worth of stuff that they built.
Right. And yes. And if it's in the proper layout, then you don't necessarily need a GUI. You just say,
okay, but what should be in that layout? I mean, in other words,
if it's scattered all over the place, the idea is that you'd have this stuff.
Okay,
so
but hold on,
like a file browser.
So a typical thing that I might want to do is I've got a bunch of definitions of random symbols and things in notebooks. I then want to put some put together some documentation, and I might want to have some separate files, one each for documenting each of these various symbols, and so on. How would I start to do that?
Right. I mean, so we can talk about whether we want to ask people to copy their code into package files, or if we want to
absolutely
load notebooks dynamically,
yes,
or do some sort of scraping and dumping that's a one-time operation.
No, wait a second. When you build the Paclet for deployment, you can do whatever you want, but you can't ask people to take, we got to let people develop in notebooks if they want to. They can develop in an IDE if they want to, but either way.
When you build the Paclet, the resulting thing might not unpack with notebook files in it, right?
Oh yeah, who cares? They're never going to see that.
Right.
The resulting Paclet is pure implementation. All they'll see is, but I don't even understand, when the Paclet unpacks, where does the documentation attach, for example?
The documentation is part of your Paclet. It's a documentation directory in your package directory. And then all you have to do is...
Then what do we expect the hook will be? Do we expect that, as we have done in the past, that we will have kind of a user area on the root guide page where it will attach things, or what?
No. I mean, that does work for browsing into, but if you put a documentation extension in your Paclet info file, then you have, the index gets built and all that, your docs just can be found. I mean, you can't browse in. There's no links from. There is a link from the installed packages and add-ons link on the root guide page, which is a very obscure way of getting into your Paclet docs, but it does exist. You can browse in that way, but typically people do it by searching anyways, right? So they'll type the name of some function or the name of the Paclet into the search field.
Let's give an example.
It'll just find it.
Let's give an example of the function repository, okay? So, there's a public function repository where you can, submit your things. They'll get published there. Then everybody can find it. There's a website. Everybody, understands it, right? So you can also privately deploy functions into your cloud account that, you can reference using the resource system path. but other people, but for example, collecting a guide page of functions that you have deployed is something we don't yet have well organized, although hopefully we will very soon. But that's a typical thing that you're going to want to do from one of these Packlets, is the tippy top. The question is, what is the tippy top of the documentation for the Packlet? Is it a guide page? If so, where does the guide page attach to the rest of the world?
Right. So, I mean, I had an idea for, well, I guess not for what the tippy top is. I had this idea that we would have a new type of page, which would be maybe sort of like a marketing type page for the Packlet that sort of lays out what's it all about.
Where does it live?
But how to get there from the guide page, I don't know an answer to that question. I don't have an answer to the knitting problem. But I do think that it would be a top level page is a good idea.
But in the function, in the public Paclet repository concept, we are anticipating that every one of these pages will be accessible to everybody through the web.
Right. So the thing that you see when you go to the index page for this Packlet on the web would be generated from what you put in here. And if you don't put anything in here, it'll be something boring that's generated from this.
Okay. Ethan on our live stream is asking, can you press the create documentation button?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've done that a couple of times. It's a placeholder. It's just making dummy notebooks. I imagine these will look something like the function repository one, at least for the symbol case.
Yes.
Then for the guide page, it'll look something like our guide pages. And this one is
will they look like
very
the
much yet to be
repository
determined.
one, or will they look like the in product one?
I mean,
I think they'll look at a function. I think
I don't think it'll be what you see is what you get necessarily.
I think the function repository one is a very nice way to do symbol documentation, and I would advocate it.
Right.
I mean, I think it has most of the elements we need there.
Right. It won't have a code section though.
In this case.
Right.
It could have a code section. I don't see why it shouldn't have a code section if it wants to. I mean, it might be a convenient way.
You're saying that in product documentation for symbols that live in Packlets will look different, perhaps quite different from in product docs for symbols that are not in Packlets.
Well, hopefully it won't be very different. I mean, we're trying to merge the look. We're trying to make the tools, the documentation tools that we currently have for the function repository be the way that people can create, user level creation of essentially built-in documentation like pages.
This is fine with me because the tools that we have for building real in-product doc format are very complicated and
yes, I know
a lot of work.
But that's do we have anybody here who's representing? Is Andre here by any chance? No. Okay, but yes, that's the whole point. Is we're trying to make a lightweight version of DocuTools that can be used by anybody that will create similar pages. And I think the right way to do that is to start for symbol pages to start from the function repository thing, which is pretty close to that.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
and we're going to have another one for guide pages.
I'm not directly involved in that effort, but you should make sure that I under the impression that people working on the light version of the documentation creation tools were doing it starting with the code, starting with the same framework that is used for the in-product docs. And
yes, that's right.
If we're going to,
what's your point?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the function repository page looks like for a symbol, but it sounds like you were.
What are you talking about? I mean, just go to the function repository. That's a page for.
Yeah. Go to one.
Okay, there's the source. Right. Now,
but there's no box of usage box here. Right?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Go to any page. Go to the built page.
Fine.
Go to the built page. Bob,
so
go to.
Here's a published page, and you can download one of these guys.
Fine. So it looks very much like that. I was looking at the unbuilt page. I thought that was the built page.
Right, that's the unbuilt page.
So this is the authoring environment, and on the web it builds into this.
Yeah.
Okay, and I mean the goal is
do we build these into notebooks by any chance? Do we also have?
We have a tool for building them into notebooks. It's a bit prototypey, but
okay. What was done here? This is a separate branch from, but we're not using cloud notebooks here, unfortunately, and we should be, and we probably will in the future. In which case, there'll be a single, it'll be a single track to build both of those. But if you're thinking, how will this work in product? There will be a way to do that.
Fine. Anything that gives people the easy ability to create docs in some approved format is great with me.
Okay, so the one thing that's coming also, hopefully, Bob, is the guide page builder, right?
Yeah.
We should review that sometime soon. Okay. The thing, because I think we should have the exact same approach that you had for building function pages for building guide pages. I mean, there's some complicated things about how you specify, this who goes first thing about creating a function repository entry which you can then link to and so on.
Right. Yeah, a bunch of things that are all coming out at the same time,
right,
referencing each other.
Right. Okay. But so let's go back here. So we've got the concept that there are these pages that you can build. We've got standardized documentation pages. I think those documentation pages should be able to contain definitions. If you choose to work that way, if your definitions are simple, you might just want to put them on the documentation pages. Otherwise, there's some other kind of page that, okay, if it's a notebook, it is getting harvested simply for its definitions. In other words, there's a notebook. It could have all kinds of magnificent text and beautiful things in it, but the Paclet maker will simply harvest it for its definitions.
Like notebook evaluate followed by dump save.
Yeah, basically. And similarly, so the different source files are .wl files, which could have come from the package editor in the front end, or they could have come from an external IDE. Or
right.
.nb files, which will be harvested. Does that make sense to people?
For the kernel extension.
That is correct.
But you're suggesting that the Paclet after it's created is not going to have .nb files for the code.
That's
.nb
correct.
file is an authoring only thing.
Yeah, that is correct. It will be harvested, just like it is for the function repository.
Right.
That notebook is harvested, and there's no sign of the notebook after it's deployed.
Right. With both this deploy button and this submit button, both of those have an implied scraping or harvesting, whatever you want to call it. And during that process, notebook files will be rendered into their guts.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about things other than the kernel component, right? And I really think it's important in somewhere here to just literally see a list. You can have palette. What can you have? You can have palettes. You can have this. You can have that. You can put in character sets. You can do all kinds of things. But do we have a list of those things somewhere?
There's a list of extensions that are.
Okay, where is it?
You can also. It's just not in any documentation file. Just in the code,
okay,
right?
So let me give you an example. So that's not good enough because we obviously need to document that. Let's say you've got a menu setup.tr file, okay? That's something you want to do. You want to change your menus, which you can do with a Paclet, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
You wouldn't do it with menu setup.tr if you knew what was good for you. But
okay, how would you do it?
So I mean, you don't want to rewrite the menus for all kinds of reasons. What you do potentially want to do is to be able to add items to menus. Okay. So you're not rewriting the stuff that's there, you're adding something new, and that's typically done via a front-end init.m file.
Okay, fine.
You would have a front-end extension here.
What I'm saying is, you guys need to come up with an inventory of what things you could add to.
Well, so we can do that, but if we make all of this, so that it's incredibly easy and, and someone's just kind of walked through while the system is turning cranks for them, we can do that. But then, it's going to take a lot longer to get this system out the door.
Okay, listen. There is no way we're going to be able to do this unless we can tell people what things you can extend. Even if the list is incomplete, even if the list gets added to over time.
Wait, but Stephen, no one is disputing any of that. I mean, there's
Okay,
going
so
to
where's
be,
the list?
I did actually write. You want me to tell you what it is?
You mean verbally?
I did actually write a
How
document.
many things are on it roughly? Is it 5? Is it 25?
It's about 10.
Okay. So can you go through them? Just to give me some sense of what they are.
There's a kernel extension.
That's for symbols.
Files.
Yep.
That's for code. There's a documentation extension.
Yep.
There's the front end extension.
Okay, you're going to tell me what that's for, but go ahead.
That's for, palette, style sheets, things like that, right?
Well, it's not things like that. Let's have a definite list. Palettes, style sheets, menu extensions. Anything else?
Well, there's a text, whatever can go into the text resources and system resources directories in the front end. I mean,
John?
Todd, is the front end and net.m considered part of the front end extension, or is it considered something different?
That's something different.
Okay.
Okay. Next up, what else?
There's a J-Link extension, so you can have Java code that is automatically found.
Okay.
There's a library link extension for library link libraries to have them automatically be found. There's a resource extension, which is kind of a generic way of locating arbitrary resources within your Paclet.
And here our terminology is colliding.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not related to the resource system.
Okay, wait a minute. But that is just, you put a random file in there, which you might, because for example, let's imagine that you wanted a file of sample data. Where would you put that file of sample data? You want some.
That would be a good example for the resource extension. You could use that, and you can look it up by name. And then there's a
wait. Hold on a second. So what you're saying is there's a random blob of directories that this thing could install somewhere in a user-based directory, presumably based place. Is that correct?
But hold on. No, you have to remember, we discussed this before. When you install Paclet, it does not scatter its contents out in the system. They all remain in one place.
Okay.
Paclet Manager tells the system about those places. So
for example, if I say import and then something, is that automatically found because $path has been extended to include the Paclet, or what?
$path is extended to include the Paclet if you have a path extension in your Paclet, right? So the path extension is another extension you can have that basically allows you to find things as if they were on the path.
So if I put a random file in my Paclet that I want to import, okay, or for example, increasingly there will be random video, audio, databases, all kinds of random things that are just files that I just want to install, right? But I need code that can find those files reliably. Is there a notion of a Paclet base or something that a piece of code, so let's imagine I've got this, okay? I put a piece of video that is in my Paclet, right? And I have a function that's going to bring up this little thing that's a video of a talking dinosaur giving help or something, talking paperclip giving help, whatever it is, okay? How do I have a piece of code that refers
to Paclet resource? Paclet resource, the first argument, the name of the Paclet. The second argument is the name of the resource. That will return the full path to that resource.
Excellent. Okay, fine. Okay, great. So we've got a way of referring to, I don't think that name can make it, but something like that, right? That's very good.
That name can't make it. I need to know now, because that's the name it's always been. And people have, if we want a new name, we can add it, but we do have to continue to support the old name.
I understand, but we better do a review of all these names. Okay, but that's a good mechanism. Okay, so Paclet resource is something that relative to the base, wherever that may be, of that Paclet's files, that gives you a way to find something relative to that base. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it is literally a file. That second argument to Paclet resource is a relative file path. Is that correct?
No, the second argument is a name. The actual location of where that
okay, but can it be hierarchical? Okay, so let's imagine I've got 10,000 things that I'm adding as Paclet resources, and I want them in a big directory structure. I want to refer to them as if they're direct. So I want to actually process them as directories. Let's say that I've got a bunch of, I don't know, machine learning training files or something. Can I do that? And I don't want to just say every one on its own. I want to be able to think of them as a hierarchical system of directories, which is presumably what they are.
Yeah, if you want to name, you could have a Paclet resource that points to, that gives a symbolic name to some directory, my stuff or something. And then your code refers to that name as just Paclet resource of some Paclet comma my stuff. And the actual location of that directory is...
No, that's not what I'm asking for. I
understand.
I want file system map to work across that directory.
Right, let me finish.
Okay.
Right, so if your Paclet resource names a directory, then your Paclet resource call returns the full path to that directory. So then that's the thing you pass the file system map, right?
Okay, fine. So Paclet resource, which is badly named in my opinion, because it should basically say, Paclet file path or some such other thing, because what it's going to return. You just told me it returns a path. It returns a file.
It returns that, but I think that's a terrible name, because the name describes, it's a symbolic lookup of something. The actual thing that you get when you call Paclet resource is controlled by the Paclet input.m file.
I understand, but
you don't have, it's not a file path. It returns a file path, but it doesn't take a file path, right?
No, but what it's returning, it's not returning the goods. It's returning a pointer to the goods. It's returning the name of the file.
It returns a full path. That's always
fine. But okay, then it's like, it should be something like, it is a, okay, we have to talk about this, but basically I understand what that's doing. I'm not sure that's the right name either, but I mean, I understand what it's doing. It's a sensible mechanism. So you name an object, that you name something that is either a file or a directory, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah.
And this then returns the path to that file or directory, the absolute path to that file or directory, so that then you can do whatever you want with it. Okay? And so basically the way I should think about this is there are certain, there's certain elements, and this reminds me a lot of what we're doing in the cloud. And I think we should model this on that, okay? So there's certain directories that are special directories that have special meanings, like the directory that contains style sheets, that is accessible from your style sheet system, right? So similarly, in the cloud, there are things like, and does somebody who knows the new version of the cloud deployment and directory structure, can they speak to this? Is anybody here who knows that? The things like the published.
I don't remember it.
Okay, so the whole point is that there are higher level things like the directory that contains scheduled tasks, okay, objects that represent scheduled tasks. The point is that those may have a different interface to reach them, and they are a different kind of blessed directory area, separate from the run-of-the-mill, I'm just a cloud object area. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, and what we've done in the cloud is to distinguish the home directory from these blessed directories, so to speak. That makes sense? And what we're saying here with respect to Paclet installation and the desktop is that, again, there are these special directories that have special significance for the desktop system, like they could install something that affects the menus. And there are other ones that are just generic file storage, correct?
Just to be clear, though, the directories that you're now talking about, all those directories that have content for packets are all inside individual.
I don't care where they are. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. It's the same thing. Look, the important point is that there are pieces in that file system where the file is just there. You put it wherever you feel like putting it. Okay? There are special places in that Paclet file system that have special significance for the system because they rewrite the menus, for example. Am I making sense?
Yes. There are a couple of directories have, like the front end directory.
No, it's not a couple. It's a
special
bunch of directories that have, it's the library link one. It's a bunch of other ones.
Yes.
There's a bunch of directories that have special significance for the system, right? It's the same thing and they have, in the cloud, it's the same thing. There's a directory that contains your tasks, for example, scheduled tasks. Now, those scheduled tasks, in that particular case, might work even if they weren't in that directory. But there are special tools that the cloud provides for managing those things when they are in that directory. Right? And the same thing here, although, as you say, these things are packaged up so that it is localized to within that Paclet. But the same idea applies, that they are system directories.
Yeah, well, and they're system directories in another fundamental sense, which is that when you have installed a Paclet now, and there is a separate, universe when you're developing Paclets, but when you've installed a Paclet, that's generally a read-only thing. It's not you're not going back and writing to the guts of the Paclet. That's not an allowed operation.
Okay.
You might write other data, but it would go into another location, not inside the Paclets.
Fair enough. And that's the same is true with some of the things in the cloud. But my point I keep on making is you've got to think about these Paclets as, they're delivering things which have special significance for the system.
Yes, and most of what the Paclet Manager does is making that work.
I know that. I realize that, right? And knitting those things into the system so the system knows about those things. Setting up indices for documentation, doing this, doing that. I get it. So the point that I'm making is, from the point of view of this Paclet info file creation thing, we've got to distinguish what things are going, okay, I've got a directory full of random gunk, okay? Some of that random gunk is library link files. Some of it is guide pages for documentation. Some of it is random assets that and by the way, asset is a good name to use for this as an alternative resource.
That's actually, that's a great idea. I like that.
Anyway, it also suggests that they're not writable. Okay, in any case, all right, so you've got these things and you've got to tell it where they are. And as a matter of developing these things, what will typically happen is that you'll have a directory with these things in it. And maybe what we give people, and maybe you've already done this, is a convention for have this directory, have these subdirectories in it that mirror essentially the directory structure that will exist in the Paclet itself. And then if you set things up with that directory structure, like documentation / whatever, right? If you set things up that way, you just point the Paclet, creator to that, file system and say, go do your thing. Alternatively, you could give it a manifest. So have you done that?
No, it's done in the former way, where you create the appropriate file layout. And the reason you do this is because you are developing this Paclet for a while, and you have to run your code while you're developing. So you definitely don't have a directory with a bunch of junk scattered in it, like a library link file and a notebook. You wouldn't be able to run your code out of that directory.
But that's not right, because what you should do is to provide a function that does whatever you do to package up the Paclet and run it, right? During development, you should have a function that just does that without packaging it up. Just says, take all this stuff, take all these assets and make them live right now. In other words, you do the part of what the Paclet Manager does that is that knitting that you're talking about, but you don't need to package up. Those are two separate things. Take all these...
Well, packaging it up, I mean, if you mean like creating a .paclet file, that's definitely something you don't do or need to do during development. But I mean, the workflow of a developer is that you are going to be, you need to create your files in the layout that is the runtime layout. And otherwise you're having to go through a step of
okay, fine.
building
That's
your
fine.
Paclet
That's
every time
fine.
you want to run it.
That's wonderful. But how about the knitting? So you're developing this Paclet, but you want to actually see what those menus look like when they're rewritten.
Yeah, right.
How do you do that?
There's a function called Paclet Directory Add. That was one of the functions that I talked with you about this weekend. Paclet Directory Add. That just says look in this directory for a Paclet, and as soon as you do that, the knitting is done.
Okay, fine. I'm not sure that's the right name. I don't think it is the right name.
But
and one of the important
you did
points
approve that name
is that it makes no permanent changes. It makes a session change.
It's a session-based change. It's kind of like appending to the path or something. It's a
okay, fine.
change. And Stephen, you did approve that name.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's go back here. All right. What is this?
Do you like to take the screen? This is the same notebook you were sharing initially. I can give you the screen back if you want.
No. Continue to share it.
Right. So Paclet Directory Add I was also going to extend to resource objects of Paclet type.
Right, and this is a good idea here. The thing he's got just below.
Right. So that takes a Paclet that's represented by resource object or just as a Paclet object itself and adds it for the session. Paclet install does it permanently.
Okay, so let's now zoom out. So we've got some idea about the Paclet creation process, okay, and roughly what that's going to look like. So it's either going to be a function that is just pointed at a directory and told just go deal with this,
right? Or
it's got something where you would explicitly write the manifest in the way that you're doing with that purple theme thing on the left. Okay, let's address a few of the things on our live stream. How would you make a Paclet that requires large external things like Python libraries, databases, etc.? Just fine. You just put the things in there. By the way, one exciting thing is that it looks like we are going to be successfully able to sandbox external languages like Python, so that it will be possible, even in the function repository, to have not only sandbox it, but also we'll be able to include a distribution so that you will be able to transparently include code written, well, in Java, Python, various other things, and have that just work, and through LibraryLink C code, and have that just work in the function repository. Is that a fair representation of reality?
Yeah,
that's an optimistic, but hopeful representation of reality. But let me just answer the person's question about, because the thinking is that maybe there could be a Python extension. So I would just declare a Python extension in my Paclet, and that would have some default root directory, or I could name the root, and I would throw some Py files or whatever into that directory, and then they could be automatically found by external evaluate, say. And that sort of thing is feasible. There's nothing on the table right now to produce that. And what was the other example? Python and
databases.
And databases, right? So the same thing with. You could have we could provide a database extension that would have some built-in logic for weaving things in your databases directory into the database system. We don't have that yet, but all those things are feasible. And you can wire those things up yourself. You can make up your own extension. So a user could make up a database extension and then search for packets with that extension and load their resources, for example. Kind of like a plug-in system. But ideally, the plan is for us to do more of these built-in extension types that we weave into the system automatically for you.
Right. Okay. So another point on the live stream here, Ethan is pointing out how to integrate with Docker and with containerization.
To me, that is something that is above the level of the Paclet system. You're talking about a Docker container for a kernel and all of its environment.
Yeah, Docker is application level, and where here application is defined as the Wolfram system as a whole.
Right. So that's a separate issue.
A Wolfram engine can install Paclets.
A Wolfram, and that would work.
Yeah, right. But the question is whether you could have a Docker image that is a Wolfram engine with a bunch of pre-installed Paclets. A thing
for the case where you don't want to have to download it afterwards. I don't see why it wouldn't be possible.
And that's kind of like the cloud. It's very straightforward. Yeah. You can just put all your Paclets, install all the Paclets you want, put them into your Docker system.
Brian is commenting on multiple versions of the Paclet. Yes, absolutely, those can coexist. That is a sophisticated feature.
They can coexist on disk. They don't coexist running in your session at the same time, right? Within one session, you just have to have one version of a Paclet. We don't have any kind of, within language containerization. But you can have multiple Paclet versions on your system loaded by different versions of Mathematica, for example.
Okay, dependencies and the whole wonderful world of dependencies. What can we say about that?
We have always planned from the very beginning of the Paclet Manager to support dependencies. That is not in 12.1. And John's got some ideas about how to handle dependencies.
Well, so do we have a brilliant solution? No, I can't say that we have one right now, but I mean, and this is, one of the hardest problems of package management generally, but I'm in favor of, solving some of the problems and then shipping those solutions rather than waiting until we've solved every problem.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah. It's a question about transmogrify and the whole way of generating. We are really going towards using the cloud notebooks as directly rather than having to transmogrify anything to pure HTML. And those will get better and better, and they load very nicely right now, and they'll get even better. And basically, you'll have both the experience, the good things about HTML and all of the SEO features and all that kind of thing, and you will have the extra feature that all those things that are special to cloud notebooks, like resizable images and all that kind of thing, will just work. Inside of itself, npm does dependencies by just stuffing a copy of the dependency inside of itself. I don't understand that comment.
So can a Paclet contain a zipped version of another Paclet, basically?
We are definitely not doing that. That's going to be a nightmare. I mean, at the simplest level, Paclet could declare some dependencies in the Paclet info file. And then, when the packet gets installed, could simply look at those dependencies and install them as well.
I mean, the real problem here is that you have versioning issues. If you have one Paclet dependent on version X of another Paclet and another one depending on version Y, and there's just no reconciling the two, then you have to have some way to say, okay, well, it's when the first Paclet using version X, that it's loaded into a namespace that's somehow completely independent from the version Y. If they use a style sheet, then they have to have some way to say, well, version X, version X style sheet versus a version Y style sheet that otherwise has the same name.
Well, this process of sucking in definitions, that's what our full definitions effectively does.
Well, but that's, I mean, I just outlined a case where that's not going to work, which is style sheets.
No, I realize that. I know that.
Style sheets don't live in the same universe.
Right, but I'm saying, in the case of symbol definitions, we were literally just talking about this earlier today in a different context. What is happening is, when you do something in the function repository, for example, it will suck in the full definitions that it needs, right? When you do a cloud deploy, it will suck in the definitions that it needs to make that code work to the best of its ability.
That's right.
Okay? And that is analogous. That is something we're not proposing to do here by default with Packlets, because Packlets are what you present in the Paclet is what is delivered, which is not the case in the case of the function repository. In the case of the function repository, it is storing, is it not, the full definitions.
That's right. That's right. It's a different paradigm here.
Right. So I mean, this dependency problem that people are noting here,
it's a hard problem in every language.
No, I understand that, but I mean, what we're doing, I understand,
we're not unique here.
What we've done with the full definitions idea is that is a way of saying freeze it. I just want to take the definitions that I have now and get everything down to the sand, so to speak. right? By down to the sand, I mean everything above system level, everything that was sort of added beyond what is in the base system. I want to, I want to explicitly store in this package that I'm building. And that's what we're doing in several places, and it's worked surprisingly well. I think that this is a different model, but I think it would be good to merge those two models so that one could do both of these things. And so one could say, somehow, when one builds the Paclet, oh, by the way, when I build up the .paclet file, suck in the full definitions that are needed. I don't see why we shouldn't offer that alternative. People may not want to do it.
You know, this is related to something else that we've discussed, which is the idea of having namespace aliases.
Yeah. Why is that relevant?
Well, so you might, for example, I mean, if at least for the Wolfram Language issue, if you really need to deal with two versions of the code, then you could, bring each of those versions in independently, using a namespace, using different aliases.
Right, I understand. That's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, it probably would be possible to have an automatic prefixing of contexts of some kind, or an automatic context mapping of some kind. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's and it wouldn't, and the rest of the code wouldn't know the difference.
It's not unlike the resource function blob.
Right, which by the way, I would like to complain about a bit, because I've been seeing way too many error messages that contain those weird, resource function $ whatever they are things. In other words, anytime I'm seeing, you need to make it so the print form of those things everywhere is something more civilized. Am I making sense?
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
Right, that's a separate thing to look at. Okay, we're unfortunately running out of time, but I'd like to. Ethan is commenting that the official documentation is not yet Cloud Notebooks. You are absolutely correct. We haven't been ready to do that. Eventually, we will probably do that. But I think we're trying to build a more modern stack for the Paclet system and so on. Would it be possible to create a style sheet gallery or browser in a Paclet? That's another question here. So, I mean,
I don't see why not.
Yeah, but you see, the main issue.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the main issue is this. Okay, it's the knitting, and you were bringing this up, Bob, in the context of, okay, where do we put this documentation?
Well, I actually don't think that's that difficult of a problem. I mean, in the sense that, I mean, if we're just willing to aggregate, kind of all of the non-Wolfram Paclets
I can take the screen
to one
back,
place. Yeah. And we've done this historically. There used to be, I don't know, maybe there still is. There used to be I always thought too small of a hook, like at the bottom of the.
I know that's the point, John. Because let me tell you about hook sizes here.
Still there.
Yes.
Yes, okay. It is. Yeah.
Let's talk about hook sizes, right? To some people, they want the Paclets they've installed. Let's say that they're working on some project. They're going to open this Paclet every day. That's the main thing they want to see when they start the documentation is their Paclet, big letters at the top, right? Somebody else has installed, oh yeah, I'm going to put in a few Paclets. They're useful because they come from other people, blah, 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 blah. Do I want to see them as a great big banner ad at the top? Absolutely not. Right?
Oh, well, okay. So to be clear, first of all, I'm talking about, imagine one tile, which is, I mean, from the root guide page, one tile, which is, user installed Paclets. Right. Find a better name, but yeah.
This is.
But I mean, if you want something that more prominently goes to a guide page, I mean, maybe the problem is, that we don't have good bookmarking facilities.
John, I don't think this is right. I think there is no way of winning this one. That is what we've got here. Okay, so let's take this page, and let's say we're going to add, some user.
By the way, keep in mind that search will work too.
I
Right.
know.
Yes.
I know, but you know, like I have a personal homepage that has things I use. So, for example, recently I wanted a guide page for for private function repository functions of mine. Okay, how do I actually deal with that? Well, what I actually do is I add it to my personal start, my personal homepage, which is what my web browser starts with.
Okay, so what you're asking for is fine functionality, but it doesn't have anything to do with Packlets.
Well, it does, because
no, it doesn't, because you might want your personal page to point to all kinds of stuff that's in the system that you deeply care about.
I understand. I understand that. But what I'm saying is the Paclet, the main operation of the Paclet is it is its own encapsulated thing, but it wants to stick its neck out, stick its hand out, and place some marker to itself, put a flag, in the sense of a flappy thing in the wind type thing, a flag, somewhere in the system. Like, it wants to put that flag by adding its menu items. It wants to put that flag by adding itself to the root guide page. It wants to do a bunch of these things, right? So under the control of the Paclet, it needs to reach its arm out and stick a flag somewhere else in the system. And so now we can ask ourselves, we have a couple of things. So where does the flag go? So we can say for every element of the system, like the root guide page, we can provide a certain flag enclosure, a certain place where Packlets can put their flags. That's one possible model. Another thing we could do is we could say free for all, we try and, well, we're going to have to label, because how do you reference different parts? Let's imagine you wanted to stick something at the top of the root guide page. How on earth would you do that?
I would much prefer we didn't try, because when we do, we lock ourselves in hard to what kinds of things
to how
we can
you
do in the root
specify.
guide page.
Right? No, I understand that. So what you want to do is you want the reservation, the enclosure for user flags. You want somewhere on this page, you want a user flag reservation.
Right. And we actually have this right now, but it's very obscure. Yeah. It's not even on your screen right now. It's add-ons and packages there at the bottom.
Right. Okay, fine. So we have an enclosure. We don't think it's a big enough enclosure. It doesn't have neon.
I don't think it is. Other people may disagree.
Fair enough. But okay. So
it could not be smaller.
Yeah, okay. Approach number one is, I don't know what happens when you go there.
It's very old-fashioned looking thing.
And it's got pink boxes in 12.1. That's
probably because those are things which have stopped working.
Right,
they're still installed, but they've stopped working because they just don't work in modern versions anymore. That would be my guess.
Click documentation. There you go.
I mean, it would be nice to get this right, but I develop Wolfram Language all day, every day, and I go to the root guide page once a month, and I search documentation 5 times an hour. So getting search right is, I think, ridiculously more important.
Well, I go to the root guide page a fair amount, even though I think I know roughly how the system works.
Maybe we should survey the live stream to see how often people go to the root guide page.
Yeah, if people want to comment on
it. I mean, it pops up when I want to get to the search dialog, but I never browse into starting from the root guide page.
I do. But anyway, but okay. Nevertheless, there has to be a discovery interface. So search is one discovery interface, right? But there has to be other discovery interfaces to these things. By the time you're adding menu items, you've got another discovery interface, right? Adding a menu item is a discovery interface. Now, for example, is that a walled enclosure of menu items, or is it free for all? Could I say I want to put a new item at the top of the help menu? Probably not. Probably you want an enclosure, a reservation into which the Paclet can write stuff. I personally think we should have these enclosures, probably, but I think that there is an issue, because I think that one person's enclosure may be, in other words, one of the great things about the system is that in principle you can change what plus does. Now, nobody ever does, except for those people who, in some obscure corner, want this thing that really overwrites plus and does something completely different. And the fact that they can do that and have it not blare at them, you're using, or the fact that we have the convention of lowercase and uppercase function names. That's a convenient thing, but a user can perfectly well, as I do all the time, name a function with something that's sort of a fake built-in function. But the issue is, by the time you've made every flag placement a second-class location, some people won't like that. So anyway, that's one of the so Ethan is suggesting discovery should be like the atom.
Well, and this is something that we haven't talked about here. I don't think we have a design for, but it's certainly on our radar, which is that you should be able to have a decent interface for not only for installing these things, but interrogating what you have installed.
Right, but I'm saying somewhere, I mean, there's sort of the like, for example, this my personal root guide page, my personal sort of homepage with links to and right now to this guide page of function repository functions, right? Now, obviously, I just made these functions, but I'm going to that page many times a day. It's a useful thing to go to. And how do I get to that page? Well, it's convenient because I just go to a browser, I say, start a new window, I click one link, and I'm there. So similarly, we need to provide something like that for people to get to things that they have created. But we don't know how prominent. Well, anyway, that's one.
Well, so I mean, if you can interrogate installed packlets, then surely one of the things you can interrogate, is where their root, where the root guide pages for each packlet is, assuming they have one.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the issue is if you look at what I have, for example, so I have in my add-ons and packages, I have a bunch of stuff that I probably installed more than a decade ago that, including some really random things, service connection for nuance. I have no idea whether that even works anymore.
By the pink box, I'd say perhaps not.
Right. Corporate analysis utilities. Okay, well, that's interesting, but I have no idea what that is. Okay, that's probably made, a really long time ago, probably 10 years ago. It's magnificent if it still works, but I do not want to see those on my root guide page every day.
Well, and I'm not suggesting you should see these on your root guide page. I mean, the installed add-ons concept, while it's not very pretty or kind of well done right now, I think the concept isn't broken.
There's a tile that you then go to that then has those things in it.
Yes.
And perhaps what you could do, as an end user, maybe you could rewrite. I don't know what you could do, because the problem is that if you rewrite that page, the hook that a Paclet puts, if it wants to put up a new flag, like when New Zealand tried to change its flag or whatever, it wants to put up a new flag. It has to be able to reach in and put up that flag, and if you just move,
but it doesn't work that way. So the packet doesn't reach in and put a flag somewhere. The system asks all the Packlets, what do you have for me? And so that would still work, right? I mean, it wouldn't break if we change the format of or change something dramatic about this page. The system looks for all Packlets in the docs they provide and makes links to them. The Packlets themselves don't have to know anything about what the docs look like. You know what I mean? They don't have to know anything about this page. They just provide information via a function.
Okay. We got to wrap this meeting in a minute, but I think one other big area that I think you guys wanted to talk about was the actual Paclet server. Right? I mean, the concept that what you've defined here is the way you can send somebody a .paclet file and they can do all these things. But the issue is we want to provide a public Paclet server where people can lodge the .paclet file on the server and then other people can simply refer to that file from the server. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. I mean, the demo at the top of this notebook on the right, the second example of field, the URL in there is a Paclet server in a resource system. That.
Wait a minute, this one here.
Yeah.
/ published.
Yeah, Bob. It's Bob's because when this is live, that Bob's will be resource system.
Okay, so I understand.
And it might be a different path.
But so this is very analogous to what happens with the function repository. That is, you can publish it privately in your own cloud account, and it is a Paclet. And the Paclet, somebody who has a copy of the system can ingest that Paclet from that private Paclet location, or
yeah, that would be the goal. But this isn't showing that really. This is showing from the published repository. It's just
but you should be able to do that.
I use my own
but
cloud
you
account.
should be able to do that. Just like it's
Yes.
a very nice mechanism for both the function system and, because somebody might want it to be in their private account with all kinds of permissions and so on, or they can push it to the public Paclet repository, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the concept is.
What Bob's showing here is that is even though this website he's got in his cloud account is sort of intended to be a representation of the real public repository. This is how it would work. This is effectively a private Paclet site he's running out of his own cloud account, and it's a tool to build the auxiliary files.
I got it. So the public Paclet repository, right? Our concept is that anybody can put stuff there, right? Presumably it has to be registered user can put stuff there.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I think it's really key that it has. It cannot be anonymous. I mean, we can talk about how your Wolfram ID corresponds to an identity that might be. Is it just a username? Is username fine, or something else? But it has to be tied to a Wolfram ID in good standing.
Right.
We have this publisher system that's sort of back in the resource system that might be the right thing for this, so that multiple Wolfram IDs could use the same account.
Yes, that's important.
Yeah, and that.
I mean, that's come up in a this stuff that we're doing with making our sort of this web page that we've been making, website we've been making. That there's been a whole can of worms associated with having a central name for the user accessed by multiple people. But yes, okay, fine. The publisher ID.
The publisher ID system might solve that. So yeah, I mean, namespacing of the Paclet is a whole conversation, and then namespacing of symbols is a conversation.
Wait a minute. So, okay. But the point is that the Paclet will have, on the public Paclet repository, the Paclet will have a directory that depends on the username, presumably. How does it work? And I should know this. I mean, in like GitHub, you just register a name, and then that becomes the directory in GitHub that your packages live under, right?
Right.
And so presumably we do the same thing.
Well, there are two components. You have a username, or there might be a team name, which is a collaborative thing. And then you have the repository name. And your any given repository is, it's a combination of those two things. So there are no name collisions because someone else can make the same name, but it's under their username or their team name.
Right. Okay. So then in terms of versioning and all that kind of thing, the public Paclet repository, people can make, can do all kinds of things with wild abandon. They can make, and by the way, they can perfectly well, if they want to put their Paclet on GitHub, they can perfectly well do that, right?
Yeah. Well, and some Paclets will, the source form in some cases will look different than what's actually being deployed. So for example, you may have a library link, and you're not going to deploy the source code for that library link, probably. There's no need to in a Paclet, but you would want to make it available on a GitHub repo if you want it to be open source.
Right. Well, but there's nothing wrong with your site arrow, whatever, could be pointing to GitHub. Is that correct?
At the moment, that doesn't work.
Why not?
A Paclet site is not the Paclet site is a server with some bit of logic associated with it, right? So it's not just the Paclet manager, when it requests a Paclet, it requests it by name. It doesn't request it by a URL, right? So it doesn't, you know what I mean? To work as
but maybe we need a layer inside the client that translates to that.
Well, and also I think that, I mean, you can't have deployed Packlets that come directly from Git repositories. You can have, Paclet add directory style stuff that comes from a Git repository, but otherwise you would have to have a different version number for every single commit in the Git repository.
I didn't understand that comment particularly, but
so I have something that represents a Paclet in a Git repository, and then I make a tweak to it. That tweak is now a different version.
Yep.
If you are considering it as coming directly from the Git source, and that's generally not what we've done. What we've done instead is, we have the open source in the Git repository, but then we have released Packlets in .paclet files that you can download from GitHub.
Okay, fine. Fair enough. But I mean, that's still a URL. So then your repo there would have a .paclet file that was built from other files in the repository in the repo there. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you open the next section, that or via resource object can provide this in-language layer in between, where it doesn't have the required mapping of name to file location for Paclet site. If you had a GitHub repo and it basically had a resource object deployed to it, like it would be in the cloud, it could point to a Paclet file anywhere. And then you could.
By the way, on a live stream, someone's pointing out that on GitHub you can obviously refer to the release version.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's what we're doing. If you look at GitLake, for example, or there are various other Packlets too. You'll see that sort of thing.
Okay.
All right. Basically, you lay down a tag with a version number, and then you upload binaries which correspond to the built version of that, of those tag sources.
Okay.
In our case, you're uploading .paclet files. Right.
Describing how. Okay. Well, we got a bunch of other things to look at. We clearly need another meeting, but at some point, Todd, we need a meeting to go over the Paclet documentation.
Right. Well, right. Exactly. And I asked for that meeting. I talked about that a few days ago.
Well, I'm around, although I'm busily working on something next few days. So if you happen to be around,
it will be next. It'll have to be next week. It'll have to be next week at the earliest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think we should wrap this up, and we should continue. I mean, after we've done the Paclet design, is there anything that's holding anybody up here that we made, any decisions we need to make? Not particularly. Okay. Fine. I mean,
I think there are a lot of decisions we need to make, but
there are a lot here that go into the.
Yeah, I mean, what's in the pre-flight and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, that needs to be figured out.
Yes, there are a lot of detailed issues, but okay, looking good. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks to folks on the live stream. See you all.
Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oh, if we don't talk before then.
Well, I'm off tomorrow, so.
Oh, okay. Well, have a good Thanksgiving.
All right. Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.